My name is Tim Blumentritt, and this presentation covers terminology and concepts that form the foundation for studying strategic management. In this presentation, I'll discuss these 11 key terms in strategy. I've only provided abbreviated definitions on this slide just to get us started, but I'll cover each of them in greater depth as we move through the presentation. And we'll come back to these terms again and again throughout the course, so take note of them because they will be important to just about everything we do. Performance is the unifying concept in strategy. In fact, as you move through this course, consider how everything we discuss impacts organizational performance. Knowing how and why a firm experiences the levels of performance that it does is the core purpose of studying strategy. The starting point for understanding organizational performance are a few ideals that executives should keep in mind when making strategic decisions. Performance normally follows if a firm has found novel ways of doing things or novel things to do that are valuable to the market, can deliver those points of distinctiveness effectively and efficiently, and packages them all in a way that customers will do business with it rather than any other alternative. Distinctiveness, operational excellence, and a winning value proposition are all central to the success of any firm. But those three terms are ideals rather than true measures of performance. To actually gauge performance, managers can use a range of financial, operational, competitive, or purpose-oriented items to monitor how their firm is doing. Regardless of how an organization's leaders choose to define performance or select goals, targeted outcomes of strategic activities should share some characteristics. First, performance must be sustained over time and across contexts. The best firms win not just in one period or in one place, but consistently. Next, strategic performance is measured at the level of the entire firm, not on the performance of any one department or function. This will have important ramifications when we discuss organizational design and strategic activity systems later in the course. And third, performance is relative to the goals set by stakeholders and based on how it does with respect to the expectations of its customers and against its competitors. So not only does a firm's performance have to meet internal expectations, it must be regarded as successful in the marketplace. It is important to note that these four perspectives on performance do not specify what measures of performance to pursue. That is up to the firm itself. All kinds of goals can meet these standards. This graphic represents one of the very first frameworks in the field of strategy. Kenneth Andrews, a Harvard professor back in the 1960s and 1970s, helped establish strategy as a body of knowledge. He created this graphic to encourage managers to see strategic decisions from a variety of perspectives. He divided the contexts in which strategic decisions are made between economic and societal factors and internal versus external factors. The top two boxes should look familiar. This graphic is the origin of the SWOT analysis. He defined a company's strengths and weaknesses as what a company can do, or what's possible for it to achieve in its marketplace. Opportunities and threats focus on what a company might do, or what's available to it in the industry. Those two boxes should automatically come to mind when making strategic decisions, but keep the bottom two boxes in mind as well. As a general rule, we typically assume that firms pursue financial returns as their primary, perhaps only goal. But there are plenty of examples in which organizations are run not just for current returns. For instance, someone may start a business because they enjoy the product or service that the business creates. Members of a family business may sacrifice some financial returns to have the opportunity to work with one another. Nonprofit organizations and government agencies can utilize strategic management even if their key outcomes are not profit-based. In all, this box prompts us to think about what the most important stakeholders really want from the organization. On the other side, we have broader societal expectations, which reminds us that firms make choices about how they will interact with the communities in which their activities take place. Some firms choose to be highly active in their communities, say by donating to charities and philanthropies or by sponsoring volunteerism, while others do not. This box represents how firms respond to and engage with non-business entities. To repeat, the purpose of this slide is to encourage executives to consider all of the firm's contexts when making strategic decisions. The objective is to ensure that any decision is properly aligned with all four. When that is true, we describe a decision as having fit or alignment with its strategic context. Determining its business model is a firm's very first step in creating a go-to-market strategy. A business model is a firm's overarching approach to competition in an industry. I'll use book retailers for quick example. There are at least 3 general approaches to selling books. Online, like Amazon, in-store chains, like Borders and half-price books, and specialty stores, like used bookshops or university bookstores. Notice that while all 3 of these types of firms sell books, they compete in very different ways. Of course, firms often blur the lines between approaches to doing business in an industry, but thinking about these distinctions is helpful for framing a firm's strategic decisions. Moving on to the term strategy, we're going to use it 3 different ways. First, strategy is a field of study that includes the theories, models, and terminology executives use when figuring out how to pursue organizational performance. Just as you learn about money and investments in finance, or promotions and buyer behavior in marketing, strategy is its own body of knowledge, which includes seminal frameworks such as the 5 Forces model and core competencies, all which are focused on explaining and improving firm performance. The word strategy can also be used in 2 other ways. Each firm has an overall strategy, or how it competes in its industry. You will often hear senior executives describe a firm's go-to-market approach, trying to give a general description of how the firm pursues customers and wins over competitors. In doing so, they are summarizing the firm's overall trajectories. Underneath a general strategy, firms will have individual strategies. A strategy can be defined as a sustained initiative used by a firm to achieve a stated goal, and firms can have lots of different strategic initiatives going on at one time. For instance, a firm can have a strategy for new product development, a strategy for customer acquisition, and a strategy for creating an efficient capital structure, among many others. Last, tactics are action items. Consider them as the specific activities that contribute to a particular strategic initiative. The portfolio of a firm's strategies and tactics, taken together, are all elements of its overall strategy. Because a firm can pursue multiple strategic initiatives at once, a key to overall success is the alignment of those strategies. When everything is working well together, a firm's collection of strategies and tactics have fit with one another. In both this sense, and as described on the slide about strategic context, fit is achieved with alignment between the pattern of the firm's investments and activities, as well as with its external conditions. I'll now shift to how strategies are created. Strategic management is the process by which a firm's managers make decisions in pursuit of organizational performance. While there are many ways to describe the strategic management process, one way is to break it into 5 steps. A firm's business definition captures the essence of a firm. It describes its core offerings and market presence, often through mission and vision statements. One purpose of the business definition is to specify clear boundaries between the activities that a firm chooses to engage in and those that it doesn't. I'll further discuss business definitions on the next slide. An organization's goals and objectives help managers translate the firm's mission and vision statements into observable metrics. There are 2 things to note here. First, goals and objectives should be derived from the firm's business definition. What the firm aims at should be aligned with how it positions itself in the marketplace. Second, and relatedly, there isn't one right set of goals for all firms to pursue. Some firms may prioritize revenue growth, others profitability, still others expansion into new markets, as discussed on the slide about organizational performance. Determining which goals are best for a firm is entirely up to its primary stakeholders. The lower left box of the strategic context slide earlier in this presentation. Strategy formulation is the most thoughtful stage in the strategic management process. This is where managers gather information about the firm's competitive context and available resources, and then create plans for strategic action. Doing a great job with analysis and planning requires not only analytical power and quality data, but also creativity and insight. The best strategic managers are able to muscle through the data, put a finger on the pulse of broader competitive contexts, and then build creative responses to strategic challenges and opportunities. Once the firm has determined what it wants to do, the next step is to implement those strategies efficiently and effectively. This step is all about getting things done. The last step in the strategic management process is evaluation, or reviewing performance and learning opportunities in all 4 of the previous stages. Engaging with strategic decisions is a never-ending process for senior managers, and they are always on the lookout for things they could improve. The first step of the strategic management process is defining the business. We'll cover the other 4 steps in greater depth later in the course. This first step forces a business to clearly state what it does and what it wants to do, and what things it does not do. This might sound pretty basic, but knowing the firm's boundaries is very important. Firms articulate their business description through mission and vision statements and written expressions of their values. Mission statements describe what a firm does in the present. They typically specify the products and services sold by the firm in the market segments that it serves, as well as a general description of its goals and how it relates to people, especially its employees and customers. A vision statement describes what the company hopes to achieve in the future. Actually, many firms are moving away from having separate mission and vision statements by combining them into one statement of core purpose. Last, value statements attempt to describe the attitudes and principles that the company hopes will pervade in the actions and decisions of its employees. Last, it is helpful to differentiate business strategy from other levels of strategy. The broadest level of strategy is corporate strategy, which involves deciding in which industries to operate. If a firm participates in just one industry, as is the case for most firms, corporate strategy is not pertinent. Business strategies, the focus of this course, consider how a firm pursues superior organizational performance within a particular industry. Subsumed under business strategies are more fine-grained levels of strategy. Functional strategies drive the activities and investments of a particular function in support of business strategies. Operational strategies, which could be called tactics, are activities that in turn support the functions. Graphically, the 4 types of strategies cascade with one another and form an organizational pyramid. At the top, corporate strategy, or deciding which industries to join, is the domain of the CEO. Presidents run businesses, vice presidents manage functional areas, and directors or managers run operations within those functions. The expectation is that the levels above give guidance, resources, and support to the subsumed levels, and the subsumed levels contribute to the performance of the whole. To summarize, this presentation covered key terms in the field of strategy. They are words that are familiar to anyone in business, but they must be used with precision because there are nuances behind each one. Please make sure you are comfortable with these definitions. We will utilize them throughout the course. And this concludes the presentation.